Jim Blackburn is the founder of BCarbon, an organization that works on carbon credits. Welcome to EarthX.
Well,
Jim.
thank you. Appreciate it very much.
Can you explain why you founded BCarbon?
Sure. BCarbon comes out of a concern about, really, it came out of flooding and concern about flooding. A lot of the Texas coast is very low-lying, and after Hurricane Ike, we were studying over at the Rice Severe Storm Center, what we call the Speed Center. We were studying really the damage done, and there's just about 6 million acres on the Texas coast that should never be developed. But the landowners have to make income. And so we were looking as to how they could make income and realized that their pasture lands, their mesquite brush, the trees that they have, all of that's pulling carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, which is a very important function. And we didn't need these lands to be developed because they're very, very hazardous from a development. So we were trying to find ways to pay these landowners to keep doing what they've been doing. And cattle income's not enough to keep most of them in the business. So we developed a carbon crediting program, probably with more kind of Texas values. We're focused on landowners a lot and trying to work with the landowners and helping basically develop what I would call the circular economy of the future.
So you said an interesting thing there. You said using Texan values. So I suppose you say that because they may be a little different than other values. So help me understand.
Well, I think they're probably similar to a lot of the Midwestern United States, but it's very strong on property rights. And some of the programs that are out on a global basis are more about country-to-country relationships with these credits, and really don't think about private property like we do in the United States, and particularly in Texas. And so we're trying to find ways to basically, if a piece of land is pulling carbon dioxide down and storing it, and we want to enhance that, but we also want to try to monetize that in a way much like growing another crop. So in a way, it's kind of like growing potatoes or anything else, and you can manage for it, you can do things to enhance it, and over time, if the market grows, it may become the dominant force in the agricultural market, but it's not there yet. It's only beginning.
And you started it, and so now you offer to those landowners that they can buy or get the credits, and you then with BCarbon sell that to whoever needs it.
We don't sell. BCarbon is actually a registry, so we're kind of the broker on credibility of the credits. We pass rules about the credits, and then we work with project developers who really work directly with the landowners, and then the project developers work with the companies that would buy the credits. And all of that exchange is outside of BCarbon, but we're finding we need to work much more closely with buyers so that they can have faith in what we're doing and try to explain how we developed our system and how it's a bit different from some of the more established systems out there.
From what you see so far, what is it sizable, meaningful income for the landowners?
Well, it's just beginning. So at this point, you'd say, only a few landowners are actually participating so far. But I think the potential is huge. But it's a new system, and there have been mistakes that have been made in the past. Some of the credits ended up on the front page or of Guardian and Bloomberg and other news sources, and everybody kind of went, whoa. That's to be expected. It's a very young, very new market. I mean, what we're doing here, and I don't think this has been well understood, we're really developing a new economic system. We're transitioning from the 20th century to the 21st century economy, and it'll be very different. And I don't think enough has really been talked about on that score, because we're redefining how we think about commerce, about supply chains, about hydrocarbons, about carbon emissions. All of that is going to be very different in 25 to 50 years than it is today, and is different today than it was 25 years ago. I mean, the conversations that we're engaged in are almost mind-blowing for someone like myself. I'm an environmental lawyer who has litigated on the Texas coast, usually in defense of environment. And it's hard to imagine as much money being spent and as much action and focus being directed at this energy transition and at the kind of what I call the 21st century economy without any laws. There's no climate law that's forcing any of this. And I would tell you it's the most amazing kind of movement at almost certainly at a national but international scale. So on one level, it's absolutely fascinating. Now, you can get very depressed about how slow it's evolving, and there's a lot of people that are lamenting this and that. But I don't think we take enough credit for the fact that this transition has well begun. You know, there are things like the carbon market that I'm working on that are just beginning. All of these things will come together, I'm optimistic. But it's not going to be pretty, and it's not going to be easy, and it's not going to be without a whole lot of strife.
Okay, so you show from what you do and what you've done in your life that, of course, there is the approach by law as a lawyer, and there is business, like creating a new market, as you do with BCarbon. And so if you look at the environmental challenge, do we need more laws or do we need more BCarbon approaches, business approaches?
Well, I think this problem is a different type of problem. I mean, you think back at the Clean Water Act and the Clean Air Act, we were basically coming at the end of the pipe and saying, do this, do that, do this. I really think that what we're working with carbon dioxide emissions is a different economic structure. We're basically saying, look, we just can't be putting waste out all the time. We've got to take the waste that's been put in the atmosphere and pull it back down.
Yeah.
Well, that's in alignment with the ecological systems of the earth.
Yes.
Because, I mean, that's the natural system, if you will, the natural economy of the earth.
Yeah.
And what we have to do, I think, is replicate that in the human economy. You know, I'm not sure you do that with laws. I think there are things you can do legally to enable make it easier for things to happen. But I think this problem's a little different than the classic Clean Air Act, Clean Water Act of the past. And I really think that the way to handle it is a 21st century way as opposed to a 20th century way. Because I think most of what we know about environmental law, most of what I've spent my whole career, was done out of the early 1970s. Our thinking needs to progress, and I think that's where we are, is at this next stage in sort of, if you will, the human relationship with the earth, where I think we're really going to an economy that will be very, very different in its structure and its impacts.
So I understand, and I concur with you that the idea of letting business do it is probably the most dynamic and powerful way, and therefore the quickest way to get things done. At the same time, for instance, if we take the example of the carbon credits, it starts or ends wherever you want to begin the loop, but the companies
That's right.
need to buy the credits.
That's correct.
And they need to be willing to do that.
That's right.
And one reason why they do it is because there is a law that forces them to.
Right.
So that's maybe the place where we need some legislation.
No, I mean, I'm not opposed to having some sort of guidepost out there. And, you know, I mean, I think every company should have a plan to avoid what they can avoid, to minimize and become more efficient, and then use carbon credits to make up for the difference. Most companies have announced an intent to meet net zero requirements by 2050. Many have commitments by 2030. Some are even commitments for net negative. Now, I will say the regulation in the European Union has done quite a lot on the international side of things, and certainly, you know, we have corporations that are international. And so when you have transactions in the EU, you may have to meet certain of those requirements. And I think those have been, frankly, quite important in that they have sent signals throughout the supply chain.
Global,
But you know, in the United States, we're not going to see any laws anytime soon. You know, at least I don't think we are. It doesn't appear during the Trump administration that that's going to be a priority. So we got 4 years, you know, that will be probably without any leadership at the Washington level. You know, the adults in the room here are the industries and the businesses and the corporations, and it's hugely different than the 70s. And I think, you know, I've been amazed at how much this has already evolved outside of government. And if business is pursuing money, and if there's money to be made being more efficient from a carbon standpoint, it'll happen faster than it will ever happen with laws.
Yeah.
I mean, I had a funny experience. I settled a case, and it was a very hotly contested case, and I won big at the federal district court, and I lost at the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, and we tried to go to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court turned us down. And then we settled the case. And it was kind of amazing, you know, and in a way they kind of said, well, you know, we kind of figured out ultimately you were right. But if you had won in court, we would have fought you forever. And it's a very interesting dynamic there that, you know, sometimes you win by losing. Yeah. And, you know, I mean, we're dealing with climate. It's for many people, it's a belief structure. Yeah. I mean, my favorite climate scientist is Catherine Hayhoe from Texas Tech University and the Nature Conservancy. And she says she doesn't believe in climate change. And you go, whoa, what are you? She goes, yeah, climate change is science. Yeah. My religion, now that's a belief. Yeah. I think many people hold climate as a belief. It's just not right. It shouldn't be happening. It's science, it's fact, it's happening, and we're going to have to deal with it. And it's going to come out of business more so than government, I think, because it's the government officials that have the hardest time going from belief structure to science.
What I never understand in that whole conversation is that, you know, indeed, people, when you use words like climate change, people start saying, yeah, but is that science? And, you know, can we agree on that? I read this report and all that. But if you instead say, listen, do we all want to breathe clean air and drink clean water? Then, you know, there's almost nobody is against you.
Yeah,
and I think it's 8 million people today, this year, that will die from air pollution, which is not something 10 years from now, but it's happening today. Yeah. And so that debate is sometimes so unnecessarily polarized, it seems.
Oh, no, I think the debate is unnecessarily polarized, but I think, you know, I mean, if you're the oil and gas industry, there are those that want to shut you down. Just get rid of it. I mean, that's a threat. I mean, so on the one hand, for some, you know, I mean, I've represented a lot of people near hazardous facilities, and they're worried about dying. It's very hard to settle when you're concerned that you'll die if this event happens. On the other hand, it's very hard to be calm about something if someone's trying to eliminate you from existence. Yep. And so, you know, we have those two kind of poles, but we've got to find how to come to the middle. And I think that probably the thing we are worst at right now. You know, I mean, I've settled a lot of disputes, and you know, a lot of the rhetoric that I hear out there isn't leading us to settlements anytime soon. But in spite of this, the market seems to be evolving. And like I said, it's one of the more fascinating things that I've observed. And this carbon market is, you know, it's a piece of it. It's an imperfect tool right now at best, but it'll get better. And one thing I'd like to see more of is that we are accepting that we're in change. We're trying to do things differently. Mistakes will be made. I'd love to see companies just stand and say, look, we're trying 5, 10 different things. Some of them may fail, and we'll be honest about it, and we'll tell you about it, and then we'll move on with the things that work. That's how we move. I mean, that's the, you know, we're in an evolutionary situation with regard to the economy. That's my belief. And, you know, evolution has a lot of dead ends. That's the way it works.
So as a lawyer, you see the damages and the impact of environmental disasters and mishaps and whatever failure by humans. You see all that, and then you spend time, in universities studying the weather patterns and basically the impact of climate change on our daily lives. So that all of that, these are, it's not very good input in your daily life. These are bad stories, many of them. So the question is, what encourages you? what makes you an optimist, as you said you were?
Well, I mean, for one thing, these bad stories, Hurricane Harvey, horrible flooding in Texas coast, from Corpus Christi all the way to Louisiana.
Yeah.
People began to talk differently after Harvey. Harvey was one of those kind of moments where it was a horrible event. A lot of people got hurt, but it's 45 inches of rain in 5 days.
Yeah.
I mean, where did that come from? You know, a lot of people who doubted climate change don't doubt it anymore because of these severe weather events. And so, it's almost like, I mean, the scale of the climate impact challenge is global. And sometimes we have trouble understanding our own household, much less something at a global level. So it's important that these events occur that begin to really bring it home. Hey, this is real.
Yeah.
I think the biggest mistake that climate science has made is talk about what's happening in 2100 and not what's happening today.
No.
And, and what's going to happen in 2100 is horrifying. I mean, but it's 75 years away. And many of us don't think much beyond, perhaps a few months, maybe a few years. So it's very hard to get scale down to a human proportion. And I think we've done a horrible job of that.
Yeah.
And I think it's easy for those that are not interested in seeing anything done to basically kind of penetrate, if you will, that gap between, if you will, the reality of a global scale and living day-to-day life. And I think that these severe storm events bring it home. They make it much more real. I'm not optimistic because they're occurring, but I do think they are bringing perception about the need to do something. And I think ultimately consumers will have a major role to play in the overall transition that is occurring.
Is there an example in history where we did something similar as a civilization?
I don't think so. I mean, I think we're at frankly, one of those kind of turning points, tipping points, where we have to do something different. That's why I'm saying, in a way, I'm not just looking at the legal solution. I think, in a way, they've been kind of Band-Aids on an environment that's being, frankly, not lived with. We've got to change our relationship with the earth as humans. And it's our economic system that is that relationship. And that's where I think the future lies. I think that's where the opportunity lies. And frankly, the optimism is in the fact that we will find an economic structure that works. And it won't be easy, and it's not going to be immediate, and it is happening now. And it's just a process of trial, error, movement, backwards. It's not, let's pass a law and make it happen. It's not that clean. It is a much different type of problem than I think humans have ever been. I mean, ever since humans have been around, we've been throwing our trash in a hole in the ground, burying it and leaving it. We have now our landfills. We have our hazardous waste. That whole thinking of take, use, or take, make, consume, throw away. That's not the future. That's economic. I mean, that's the way our economy has worked. Circular is the future. And that's the optimistic kind of, I think, view where we begin to bring the human economy in line with the Earth's natural ecological systems. I don't think anything could be better as a statement of what we achieved in the 21st century. Now, it's going to take a while. But if we don't have the vision, it won't happen. And that's what I'm working on with my students, with the BCarbon structure. I mean, I think BCarbon is a great idea. It may not be, but that's kind of my attempt to try something. And I think we ought to have millions of those things going on. And to me, that's the kind of the wonder of the moment.
Thank you, Jim Blackburn.
Pleasure. We're out of time.